Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Linda Patterson. I'm the Executive Director of Badgers United, and it's my pleasure to welcome nearly 100 of you here today live, and hope to have many more join online during our live feed. Badgers United is a nonprofit organization really focused on data to look at where UW-Madison is compared to our peers and other universities. We are funded solely by contributions from individuals. We're very grateful for their support, not only in dollars, but in their time and connections and outreach that they do on our behalf. As a nonprofit organization, we are governed by a board of directors, and I wanted to recognize our board and thank them for their contributions. You'll see their names listed here. You may recognize a lot of them. So again, we couldn't do it without their leadership, and you'll have a chance to meet some of them today, including the chair of our board, Peter Kais, who really gives tirelessly to this organization, is so passionate about our flagship university. And I personally want to say thank you to Peter for all of the time that you put into this and being so responsive to staff and to our community. So welcome, Peter. I'll turn it over to you.
Before we get started, I want to thank you, Linda, for all your work, and also thank each of the panelists for the time you've put into this. I'm the chairman of this group that really are unabashed supporters of this organization. And we all are very proud of what the citizens of the state have built over the last 175 years, almost 175 years. And we want to use the foundation of the study, which you saw part of the highlights running earlier, to talk about what we're trying to accomplish and what we're concerned about. This is a little bit of a dramatic representation here, but if you look at any of these four issues in the wrecking ball, you'd have issues managing your budget. But when you put all four of these together, a decline of state support, a tuition freeze, restricted financial flexibility, and everything that's happened with COVID, it's really an unbelievable chain of events and something that's rattling the foundation of the university. I firmly believe Madison and the system are some of the greatest economic engines in the state. Tommy Thompson likes to talk about, other than the citizens, the university is actually the greatest asset within the boundaries and the thing that people really recognize around the country. And if you look at the dollar of investment and what that can do for the economy, what it can do for job creation, and what it can do for starting companies and having an entrepreneurial spirit, I really do think the font of money of it is the university system. This would be a horrible stock chart. Hopefully none of yours look this way, but this shows what the funding has been since the system was founded. Roughly 1/3 of our budget has, the budget today is roughly 1/3 of what it was when the system was put together. That's something that is horrible. And when you look into the Wisconsin Policy Forum study, it'll show how this is portrayed versus other states. Again, today, only 14 cents of every dollar that goes to the system's budget is coming from the state, yet 100% of the decisions are being done by that institution and by the state itself. Looking at tuition, which is becoming very, very important to the state, you can see that we are falling behind. Not only has state support declined to 14% of the budget from roughly 45%, but also we've fallen behind versus other institutions. Today, our in-state tuition is number 10 in the Big Ten, and I don't think any of us would believe that our quality of education is number 10 in the Big Ten. And the only other two states that are behind us in terms of a tuition freeze or lack of growth are states that have funded the freeze by putting more dollars into the system, not less. So putting all that together, we have a massive shortfall. This shortfall is caused by a decline in revenue in some sources such as athletics, housing, research, and also has a huge increase in cost of doing business today, given all the obstacles we have to overcome. And what's even worse is we don't have a balance sheet to be able to fund some of these short-term issues with debt. We are the only major research institution that doesn't have the ability to bond, and that's something that we think should be corrected. So that's the background for the discussion. I'm going to turn it over to this panel to talk about each one of these topics. The moderator today is a friend of mine, Mike Knetter, who represents probably one of the more important constituencies today, which are the private donors to the university. He also has a background in academia, most recently as being dean of the business school at Madison. And he also is involved in many corporations as a director. So he has a great understanding of private funding, public institution, academia, private corporations. And he's also a trained economist from Stanford and is a student, was formerly a student at UW-Eau Claire. So he is uniquely qualified to talk about what's happening at the system, the state, and at UW-Madison. So with that, let me turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I have a hard time thinking of anyone who's benefited any more than me from the UW system writ large, and that's certainly what drew me back to Wisconsin. I'm delighted today to moderate such a distinguished panel of leaders who really collectively represent some of our most accomplished alumni, business leaders, public policy makers, and indeed volunteers at the university today. They all understand the inner workings of UW-Madison and the UW system to varying degrees, and they also appreciate how the flagship campus creates unique opportunities for its graduates and how it intersects with the broader economic environment in the state. I'll introduce them one at a time and give them each a chance for some opening remarks in their respective areas of interest before we take audience questions. First up today, we've got Kevin Conroy, CEO of Exact Sciences, whose mission is to help play a role in eradicating cancer through early detection. Kevin has led Exact from the time it was a 3-person Boston-based company into the largest global cancer diagnostics company with 5,500 employees in Madison that served over 4 million patients just last year. Previously, he led Third Wave Technologies, a diagnostics company that was founded by UW professors Jim Dahlberg and Lloyd Smith. He located Exact Sciences in Madison in part because of the existence of the university. And despite being the one Michigan man on our panel today, Kevin has grown into a huge Badger fan and supporter. He's on the Chancellor's Advisory Council and has just been a great friend of the university and the Madison community. So Kevin, I was wondering if you could kick things off and talk a little bit about the university's importance to your business and how that even influenced your location decision in the first place with Exact Sciences.
Well, first of all, thanks, Mike. And it's really great to be part of this panel. The UW-Madison and system are something we really care about. And it is fair to say we would not be here. I wouldn't be here. The company wouldn't be here if it wasn't for UW. It actually goes back to Jim Dahlberg, who was a professor doing research, discovering an enzyme. That enzyme led to an innovation in diagnostics, which led to Third Wave Technologies. I joined that company. When it got acquired, the insight was you could take that same technology and apply it to colon cancer screening. Joining Exact Sciences, building a product, a test, Cologuard, around that insight that Jim Dahlberg discovered in 1996. So here we are 2.5 decades later with a large company that is giving people the ability to live out the careers of their dreams. That dates back to that research at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And countless people that have left UW-Madison, graduating and joining Exact Sciences, and the contributions they've made are just incredible. So I think that's one example of many companies that have done similar things, and Epic and Promega, and the list goes on. We cannot allow that innovation engine to be shut off, and that's the fear.
So you rely currently even on some of the strength in the life sciences, I'm sure, in your recruiting. Is that a pipeline for talent for you as well, Kevin?
It's nonstop. It's the vast majority of scientists that we hire are from UW, in particular UW-Madison, but also the UW system. The biochemistry department here is renowned all over the world. It's a top 10 program worldwide. And that's what we do. We're a biochemistry company. And the fundamental, most important asset we have is our people. And we need the very best people, because we're competing against other hubs, whether it's Stanford or MIT, the two biggest biotech hubs. We can't be second fiddle to those hubs. We need to lead, and we can only do that with a strong UW-Madison.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the timing of Jim Dahlberg's insight, 1996. I was thinking today, it was probably about 25 years ago that people around the country really began to appreciate the importance of a research one, an elite research university, to the ecosystem of a local economy, because we've really, almost all the growth in the US economy is in these knowledge intensive businesses over the last 25 years. And that's sort of when events conspired against us at Wisconsin, and we've seen all these big funding declines. We funded the university incredibly well when it seemed less fundamental to the economy, and now that it is, we've really kind of run up against the wall here. Well, thank you for those insights. We'll get back to you, Kevin, with some questions. Next up, we've got Cory Nettles, who's the founder and managing director of Generation Growth Capital, a private equity fund focused on buyouts and providing growth capital to small businesses and lower middle market companies in the upper Midwest. Cory currently serves as a board member for several corporate, private, and nonprofit organizations, including, full disclosure, the UW Foundation. Cory graduated magna cum laude from Lawrence University in Appleton, and then the University of Wisconsin-Madison Law School. He has served as a Secretary of Commerce previously in the Doyle administration, and a practicing attorney prior to his career there. So Cory, if you could give us some thoughts about maybe how the Wisconsin legislature could help public universities through this fiscal challenge with your knowledge of how things work from your days in commerce. I'd love to hear about that and anything else you care to add.
Great. Well, Mike, thanks so much for the introduction. And, I can really pick up on where you and Kevin left off in your conversation. And part of what you said is, 25 years or so ago as a country, we really started to appreciate the importance of R1 research universities to the economic development ecosystem in our respective states. And, certainly I was a proud Badger alum through the law school, but it was during my time as Jim Doyle's first Commerce Secretary that I really came to appreciate the awesome power of the UW-Madison as an economic juggernaut for our state, not only in terms of the number of people that it employed and the amount of federal research dollars that it attracted, but it was the intellectual engine for our state economy. I often think of it as sort of the Intel chip inside of other products, and that's the power of what we have at the UW. And I came to appreciate that really as Commerce Secretary, not only their directs, but their indirects. You've already heard Kevin talk in a compelling way about technology transfer and commercialization, and how the research being done at the UW drove what's a phenomenal business in exact science. We're all aware of the relationship with WRF and how that technology is spinning out. So I certainly saw that as Commerce Secretary in spades. And as much as I love the entire UW system, we have one major player in the global sweepstakes of preeminent institutions, and that's UW. And part of what I came to appreciate is that we have to get both ends of State Street, our legislative and our executive branch working with our university at the other end, working in harmony to protect and to build upon what is a phenomenally world-class institution. Certainly since the time that I left the Department of Commerce and started, several businesses of my own, including my private equity fund, I've come to appreciate as a business person the centrality of the UW to our overall state economy in terms of our ability to educate knowledge-based workers, to drive what is a knowledge-based economy. Wisconsin has a long distinguished tradition as a manufacturing economy, but increasingly we've been trying to turn the corner from that Rust Belt economy to a knowledge-based economy, and UW is central in that. And all of us have heard about brain drain. Well, we need brains first, and those come out of the UW, and we've got to figure out how to keep those here and attract others here. As a member of the business community down in southeastern Wisconsin, I'm a longtime board member at the MMAC, where we've got from small to medium to small, from large to medium to small businesses as members of the MMAC. And we all understand and appreciate the value directly and indirectly that having UW in our state is for all of our businesses and for this state economy. So I've been pained by, the story that Badger United invested in and the great report done by the Wisconsin Policy Forum and identifying the problems that we have and this question about us falling behind. And I feel a great sense of urgency that all of us as leaders in our community, we need our friends in the legislature, we need our friends in the executive, but all of us have got to redouble, triple our efforts to make up for some of the ground that we've lost, but really to project this institution forward, this great global institution forward, for the next couple decades, so that we not only maintain its preeminence, but we do that in an effort to raise the fortunes of all the citizens of Wisconsin, including our economy. So I'm concerned about what I'm seeing and what I'm learning, but I'm very mindful of the power, the awesome power of this institution and its storied history. And if we rally, how much greater we can make it yet for our future to all of our benefit. Thanks, Mike.
Great, thank you, Cory. I may come back to you with some questions about how we straddle maybe the tension between maybe more of the other campuses in the system wanting some of the same horsepower that Madison has or firepower, how we navigate that. Next, for maybe a little bit more of a policy take, I want to go to Mike Grebe, who is the Chief Legal Officer for Advocate Aurora Health Care and currently serves as Vice President of the UW Board of Regents, having been appointed in 2015. He's a graduate of the UW Law School like Cory and was a practicing attorney before taking on his corporate role. Mike, I know your family's been looking at this issue a long time. When I started as dean at UW-Madison, I spent more time talking about these issues with your father. So I'm sure the two of you have had plenty of conversations about these issues as well. But the study, really suggests UW-Madison and more broadly the UW system have quite a bit less operating autonomy than many similar university systems. The employees of the university really don't control a lot of the normal strategic levers that a corporate leader would control or most other university leaders would control. And, I see some of our leaders like Provost Mangelsdorf goes off to run Rochester University. Well, she gets to set her tuition. They can borrow money when they need it. Some of the things Peter mentioned, obviously, we've got people capable of doing that. Why aren't they able to do it in our system? And what could we do to make headway on that?
Well, thank you, Mike. And first of all, let me begin by thanking Peter and the entire Badgers United organization for inviting me to participate today. I appreciate it. And even more than that, I appreciate the dedication and hard work that you guys are doing to support our university. What you do makes a difference and it matters. So thank you. I'd also maybe start by just echoing something that Peter said that I've heard Governor Thompson say a number of times, and I don't think it can be said too frequently or directly. The University of Wisconsin is the most important institution in this state. It has the most impact on the most people of any organization, and it is the largest economic driver in the state of Wisconsin, period. Those of us who have benefited from the university's existence, and those of us who are current stewards, formally or informally, I believe, have a responsibility to maintain the excellence of this institution. And that's a big part of what you guys are helping make happen right now. So I'm very appreciative. Mike, the fact that you spoke to my father about these issues, which I assume wasn't last week, but was probably a while ago, suggests something that I've known for a while. We've been talking about these issues for a long time. These are not new issues. They've been raised and not addressed completely for many, many years. I think that the existence of the COVID pandemic, the crisis that we find ourselves in some other, the confluence of some other circumstances, make now a very important time for us to act. You asked about autonomy. The report notes that UW-Madison has less autonomy than almost all of its peers. You're correct. The same is true of the system. We find ourselves in a circumstance where things have to be done, but we can't set our own rational tuition. We don't have that capability. We can't engage in bonding. We aren't able to manage our own capital projects. We aren't able to take a firsthand role in building our own buildings. We are hamstrung as a system in a lot of ways from doing the things that we absolutely must do to retrench and make this university strong and keep it strong. One of the things we want to do is convince, as Cory put it, the folks at the other end of State Street that we can be trusted with those tools, that we need those tools, and that we will exercise them in a way that redounds to the benefit of everybody across the state. I think it's essential, and I think I speak for probably most of my, if not all of my colleagues on the board, that that is essential for the success of the university going forward.
Thank you, Regent Greeby. I was wondering if you could maybe share a little bit more about the role the regents might play with the legislators in discussing some of these issues, or is that something that is really delegated to Governor, I don't know, Governor or President Thompson?
Well, it's both. I mean, the role of the regents is, and ought to be, largely to set policy, to be a governing board and identify those areas that we think are strategically important that need to be addressed and moved forward. We have a vitally important oversight role as well. One of the benefits of having a system is that the system is able to speak with one voice when we address the legislature or the governor, as opposed to having, say, 13 different voices all requesting different things. We try to do this in a constructive, productive way, and that is carried out through regent leadership, through individual regents, and through the system president's office. I'd add this, though. One of the reasons that I would emphasize an organization like Badgers United is so important is because the voices of the people who are participating in or listening to this call carry a tremendous amount of weight as well. And that support can be as important, if not in some cases more important, than what the regents might advocate for on behalf of the system.
That's a great point, and I'm gonna jump out of order here a second because I think I know just the person to follow up on that. So Mike Shannon's family has been attending UW-Madison since his grandmother and her brother enrolled during World War I, followed by his parents, Art Shannon and Helen Hildebrandt Shannon during World War II, and then more recently, Mike and his three siblings. You know, as Mike would say, they all know the value of in-state tuition at a great school. But today, one of Mike's roles, in addition to being an incredibly successful founder of a private equity business in the leisure and hospitality space, which I'm sure the COVID-19 crisis has given Mike plenty of opportunity to hone his operating talents in a really tough crucible of an environment right now. But Mike's also the chairman of the board of directors of the UW Foundation. And we have a lot of people who are, you know, investing in the future of the university and are important stakeholders. And, you know, one of the things that's always occurred to me is most of the stakeholders of the university have a natural way to be organized. You know, the students have student government, the faculty have faculty government, the system administration meets with all the leaders of the campuses. So, everyone sort of has a voice, and philanthropists didn't really have a big voice. They were all kind of individual actors, and the foundation by design tries to stay clear of politics. And one of the great things about Badgers United and Badger Advocates is they actually can give voice to those stakeholders in a more organized way. And so, Mike, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the value of the university from your perspective, and maybe specifically address, do you have any concerns that at some point philanthropists begin to worry that their gratitude is somehow being taken advantage of if legislators aren't willing to take what seem to be fairly simple actions to allow the other revenue streams to continue to grow along with the philanthropy?
Thanks, Mike. I think alumni really on two levels you have concerns. One, individually as a voice for hundreds of thousands of living alumni, what are they concerned about with UW-Madison? Well, number one, if their children are applying, they're concerned about getting into the university, so it's access. Number two, and probably the largest, is affordability of higher education today and the cost. And that is a double-edged sword when you look at freezing tuitions at the same time, need to have the best and the brightest. They're worried that their degree means as much in terms of quality as it used to be, in terms of the rankings, in terms of will people respect, particularly at UW-Madison, when you see falling research going down to number 8 now. Can we stay competitive in a very competitive world? And so particularly with affordability, and I think President Thompson has really done a great job as a visionary looking at how can we make things more affordable by really significantly increasing our online education. And I think that's a big opportunity for the UW system as a whole. Right now, we have 160,000 students, largely locked in an outdated residential college model. We have less than 10,000 that are truly full-time remote students. That world is changing. Just like from diesel fuel to electric, that world is changing pretty significantly. People want a consumer-driven education, not a supply-driven education. By a constrained or older system. So they are concerned a little bit about where the university is headed. As a collective organization, Alumni, WFAA is a $4 billion endowment of grateful donors, if you want to call it that way, but grateful students who have made their way in life and have been able to give back. And they are very concerned that today, much unlike several decades ago, the percentage of the university's budget, operating budget, is now twice as much funded by grateful donors and alumni than it is the state. And so they have a much larger collective investment in it, in a much larger collective. So I think those are really sort of the things that alumni today are most concerned about. And if you switch to the business hat, we employ thousands of folks here in the state of Wisconsin. We're a global business. And today, we are concerned about the quality of students. Do they have the right skills for today's competitive global 24/7 technology-enabled workforce? For example, Mark Travel, one of our investments here in the state of Wisconsin, it is a large global software manufacturer. It's not just destination resorts of dreams and secrets and all the places we wish we could all be right now, but it is truly depending on 24/7. The vast majority of the world's travel agents live by a system developed in Milwaukee, Wisconsin by the Lamachia family. They really truly are technologists. And so the needs of the employer, just like those alumni, are concerned about where the university is headed and whether we have relevant skills for today's workforce.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Our last panelist, but maybe the one who's spent the most time of all on these issues, is former system president Katharine Lyall. Katharine is a distinguished economist. She's written probably more than any of us have ever read about the nuance and details of higher ed governance and administration. I've read a lot of her writing, and it certainly influenced how I thought about my work as a dean. Katharine, I wanted to ask you, we talk a lot about the importance of the flagship campus and research. And I think sometimes, people in the outlying areas of the state, further away from Madison, maybe don't see how that's as relevant to them. Why do you feel UW-Madison's ranking in national research is important for the flagship campus. Katharine, you're still muted.
Not anymore. Can you hear me now? That's a good question. And I think you're right that often people in other parts of the state outside of Madison lose track of the connection there. But economically, the UW system is just about the state's only statewide institution that has economic development reach across the entire state. And UW-Madison is the engine that drives that. And the research functions that go on at Madison are a large part of that driver. With $200 to $300 million a year in outside research funding, and I stress outside, it's not taxpayer money, it's research money that the faculty earn by competing nationally at foundations and in federal arenas for that money. The spillover effects of that kind of money being spent locally on salaries and then after that on gasoline and dry cleaning and all the things that we spend to live blankets the entire state. And if Madison ceased to be a major research engine, it would be felt in Superior and Eau Claire and Whitewater and everywhere else. So I think it's important for us to focus on Madison's declining rank in research funding and to think about what we can do to make that more stable and grow if possible.
Thank you, Katharine. It's certain, Katharine, you're now off mute, and I'm getting a little echo. You know, those are great points, and I think what a lot of, you know, it's easy to forget that without that excellent research reputation, our flagship doesn't attract all the out-of-state students that we do, and it doesn't attract all the philanthropy that we attract. And, you know, collectively, those things bring in, I'd say, roughly $1.5 billion or more dollars per year into the state of Wisconsin from outside, which is really what makes the flagship campus a completely unique animal within the collection of the system campuses, and makes one wonder, why isn't there kind of a separate governance focus on that business, because it is so different and so important to economic development.
Mike, can you imagine if we were a private company thinking about locating in Wisconsin, what kinds of incentives the state would want to provide to us to bring in $1.5 billion a year in revenue and incomes and local spending. And just because we happen to be a public institution, I think people lose sight of that fact. But it's a very valuable business for the state of Wisconsin.
We're going to move now to some audience questions. I had a question that came in from John Schaefer, and it's really, I'd say, in the governance wheelhouse. And, you know, maybe I'll start out with Regent Greeby with this one, because you did talk about how governance issues are really at the center of the university's ability to control capital projects, tuition, bonding, et cetera. John Schaefer wonders, you know, why should the legislature consider changes now in the authority to borrow money or manage short-term cash flow for at least the flagship, or should they be doing it for the entire system? Do you have a point of view on that, and how could we make that happen?
So if I understood the question, Mike, part of the question was, should this happen for the flagship or for the system? Well, I think that it would make sense for it to happen system-wide, whether there might be some arrangement where UW-Madison would have its own separate bonding authority. Perhaps that would work. We need to get to the point, sort of point A in this process, where we have bonding authority. We don't. Again, to go back to the excellent report that was prepared, we are one of the very, very few, if not the only system, and UW-Madison may be the only flagship in the country that doesn't have that authority. Chancellor Blank addressed the Regents last week at our meeting, our virtual meeting. Otherwise, we would have been in Madison. And she made this point very clearly. With the shortfall as a result of COVID that was described at the outset of this presentation that Peter Kais demonstrated, any other business, any other academic institution similar to ours would have been able to borrow money to address it. We can't do that. It really hinders our ability to be effective in terms of managing the university, as Katharine put it, as a business.
Thank you for that. I think it would be a great thing for the system to have that authority. I also think you can make a case that it's almost more critical for Madison because the facility infrastructure that a research institution requires is dramatically different, relative to its enrollment. And I think that's where, running the foundation, we see the real problems looming is with facility projects where the state used to help provide a lot of funding. Now they're not, and they won't let us borrow. So it really puts you in a box. And, these are big upfront cash flow items that pay dividends for a long time. And so I feel a special urgency about it, being a Research One institution with a big research footprint to get that authority. Another question from Glenn Tellock, who notes that the tradition of the Wisconsin idea is certainly threatened by, as Glenn put it, lagging public support for higher education. But I think it's not just the public investment of taxpayer dollars, it's the flexibilities that we're talking about. What can the university do to restore greater public support for its needs, either for flexibilities or funding? And Cory, I'm going to start with you on this one. We've talked a little bit about, the university's reputation, in particular the flagship's reputation in other parts of the state. And what do you think we need to do to make a better case for UW-Madison?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And we do have a failure to communicate here. I think in fairness, and this point has been driven home to me, quite effectively, that across the rest of the state, there are people in our community, citizens in our community, taxpayers, who really feel that the UW is disconnected, is not available, is not accessible, is not affordable, and they do not see the immediate benefit to them in their day-to-day lives of this, preeminent institution. And I think part of what we have to do is a better job of explaining to citizens all across the state, in the context of our history as a land-grant institution, we have to explain to them, what the benefits to them are in every corner, from Fenmore to Lancaster to Wapaka and all points in between, of the university to them and their part of the state. And I don't think we've done as good a job of articulating the importance of that and that value proposition. Second, I do think we have to address their concerns about accessibility. In their perception, the UW has become increasingly inaccessible as it's become more preeminent and more selective. And I know when I was back in state government, invariably I'd hear from some legislature who had a constituent who had a kid who couldn't get into the UW. And the family said, we're good middle-class citizens, we pay all these taxes, yet my kid can't get into the UW. So I do think there's issues there about access that we have to make sure that everyone understands, and that we explain that as best we can to them, and how we've been able to maintain access and maintain affordability on a relative basis. But I think at the end of the day, after we've stated that case and that value proposition, all of us in this state have got to step up to support, this institution, because if UW slides, it won't fail, but it'll slide. And that's the whole point of this falling behind. We all lose in that. All across our state, we lose in that. And I think we've got to do a better job of stating the case to these families about what the return on their investment is and what the value and the benefit is to them in their lives, and how if UWM does not succeed, we all fail. And then the last thing I'd say is that we also have to rationalize across the system the relative value propositions of each campuses. So I'm sitting here in Milwaukee. I'm a Milwaukee native son. I love UW-Milwaukee. I support the current chancellor there and his predecessors. But UW-Milwaukee is not UW-Madison. And there's a place for UW-Milwaukee in the ecosystem. It's a different place than UW-Madison. There's a different role for UW-Parkside. There's a different role for UW-Eau Claire. So I do think we have to have some conversation about rationalizing our investment and our resources. These aren't going to be one-size-fits-all solutions, but we can't also have UW-Milwaukee and Madison in competition. I often say this is the biggest 75 miles, the longest 75-mile distance in the country is between Madison and Milwaukee. We got to figure out how to close that and have them move more to co-opetition or collaboration than competition. But that means that we've all got to come to terms with what our respective value propositions are at these campuses across the state.
Great answer. Anyone care to chime in on that, or can I move to another question? We've talked a little bit about tuition, and there was an earlier segment on this report featuring Governor Thompson, Chancellor Blank, and Chancellor Monet from UW-Milwaukee. Very interesting. And Governor Thompson indicated that when asked about rational tuition policy, that if any attempt to increase tuition, even selectively, were included in the budget request, it would be dead on arrival. And I'm wondering, do legislators understand, for example, that with the volume of philanthropy and emphasis on scholarships and need-based scholarships at UW-Madison, that we're able to offer Bucky's Tuition Promise, which essentially makes UW-Madison tuition and fee free for students from families below median income, which I haven't done the math, but I have to imagine that means the net price of tuition that we're offering at Madison on average is probably lower than anyone else in the system, which just doesn't seem right. Katharine, as a former system president, how do you deal with a situation like that where you get that message from the legislature, but it doesn't really seem to, I don't understand, maybe you can fill in, what would the logic be? Why wouldn't it make sense for Madison to be able to raise tuition a bit, since any student from below median income family isn't going to be affected by it?
Well, it makes perfect sense for Madison to be able to do that. And I see this continuing tuition freeze issue as a political issue. It's more convenient for legislators and elected officials to be able to say to families that are worried about their kids getting into school, don't worry, we've frozen the tuition. And as someone pointed out earlier in the program, it's one thing if you do that and the legislature funds the freeze, which it's done in many other states. It's another thing if you have almost a decade of frozen tuition, as we have, with no backfilling and no funding to offset it. I think to your point earlier, private donors might begin to wonder why they're filling the hole when the legislature won't let the university do what it needs to do to maintain its competitive status. So I would hope that legislators would begin to think about this, read the report, and ask themselves, if this were a private business, could it survive, much less thrive, with its prices frozen for a decade? Really? What will happen, of course, is that the quality of education will fall. access will fall. And we'll begin to see the kind of slide that Cory or someone was referring to earlier. It's so hard to pull out of that kind of a downward slippery slope. So I would hope, at least as I see it, and I read the report, it documents that the UW system and UW-Madison have been lurching from biennium to biennium over the last decade, and that it's time for us to get a grip on a long-term strategy that will stabilize the university and what it can contribute to the state. And that's going to require the university, but also the Board of Regents, the legislature, the governor, and others with interests, donors, others with interests in the future of this system, to sit down in some way, virtually or otherwise, and say, let's put together a sustainable program for a university system that can continue to serve the state well.
Mike Shannon.
Yeah, Mike, I would add that, we need to get the legislature to come together around a common purpose. And I think we can agree that we all love the Packers, we all love the Badgers. We all need to unify around a third thing, which would be education is a huge net importer of our economy. As someone who grew up in Wisconsin, we need to face the facts that we have a competitive marketplace out there in higher education and the state. And we have a declining population. We have a declining enrollment. We have a declining powerhouse in UW-Madison in terms of its rankings. And we need to fix that, because if we don't, others are. And others are both from a donation standpoint, from an investment standpoint. You're seeing others around us. We need to rally around that legislature and realize that the one small $95 million request of President Thompson and a multi-billion-dollar budget is just the beginning of what's necessary here to maintain our competitive stance just around ourselves in the upper Midwest, if nothing else. And we need to remodel how we do our higher education. We can be proud, in the old days, we used to be proud of how few people we admitted. Our admit rate was 10%, 15%, 20%. Is it any wonder there's a concern about and a distaste for UW-Madison? What about the 80% we didn't have the ability to admit? And that is, got to change. The residential college model is a dinosaur. It can be highly relevant for a select few in this state. But we have 815,000 people that started college and never finished. It's a tragedy in this state that we're not completing our education, because the value of a public education is a one-year return on investment, if not even faster. So we need to upskill, up-educate our citizens. And the legislature's got to take the lead on that. It's the most comprehensive, quickest return on investment we could possibly make. And yet we're fighting wars from decades ago about how few people got in. And the language needs to change. And frankly, our arsenal needs to change. I come back to higher online education. This needs to transform from a supply-led residential college system of higher education to a marketplace, consumer-led education, where we can give everybody a University of Wisconsin system education online, anytime, anywhere they want it, at a hugely affordable price. We're already affordable, but we can't be silly about this. I think we all need to get together. Let's agree on the Packers, the Badgers, and the value of a higher education.
Well, I agree with you, so we can start there. Question from Bob Venable, referencing the report. They noted a 13% decline in enrollment system-wide. And we saw in one of the charts in the video lead-in today that there's quite a wide range of outcomes across the campuses. And I think, we know that there's still tremendous excess demand for admission at UW-Madison, which you referenced, Mike. But how does the system navigate this system-wide declining enrollment and keep it from sort of becoming the thing that takes everything down. And I guess I'd start with Mike Grebe, if you could comment on that.
Sure. I think that is a significant issue. The demographics in the state of Wisconsin are fairly clear. We can project how many high school graduates we're going to have in years to come, and it won't be the same as it was. Cory Nettles described this maybe in a way slightly different than I would. But one of the things we need to do is look at all of the schools across the system and make sure that they are fulfilling their best purpose and that they are organized, structured, and focused to be the most successful institution that they can be. That will not be the same for everybody. As Cory pointed out, Parkside is not Madison. Parkside is spectacularly successful in fulfilling their mission. That is an easy example to use. That's one of the things that we need to understand. And as part of that, we need to understand that it may well be that schools have smaller enrollments going forward simply because of demographics. And we have to plan for that. And we need to begin planning now. The Flagship may be in a different circumstance than some of those other schools because it draws from a much broader population of prospective students. But it's something the system needs to deal with because it's coming.
Thank you, Regent Greeby. Representative Murphy chimed in with a question about our research ranking, and I'm going to parlay it into a question. He notes that for almost 50 years, UW has not gone after Defense Department research. How has this affected our research rank? And I think, I don't know how much defense spending would have driven the last decade, but as noted, it's a 50-year, essentially, we've not been in that game. And it's a fairly recent phenomenon that we have started falling behind. So I'm not sure it has to do with the Defense Department policies, but that's certainly something to take back as a follow-up item. I'd want to ask Kevin Conroy, I know at Exact Sciences you work with a variety of different universities and, you're located in Madison, so obviously you have a lot of contact here. What could we be doing better on the research front in industry collaboration from your perspective, Kevin?
Well, this is an opportunity for growth, and I think it's tied back, Mike, to the idea of greater autonomy and independence. If we have a system that it has greater independence, it is going to have greater accountability to companies within the state and really broadly nationally to be able to generate more corporate sponsored research. We have a corporate sponsor research program with Mayo Clinic. Over the last decade, that has been about $75 million. We have a relationship now because of an acquisition we did with Johns Hopkins University that will be significant. We recently announced a third corporate sponsored research program with TGen, which is affiliated with the City of Hope. These groups, because of their independence and accountability, they go after these types of relationships with the passion that probably doesn't exist today at University of Wisconsin. And I think you would see that change with greater accountability. And it's so critical because, look, we need the best professors at UW. That's how over 100 years you built UW-Madison. It was because you had the very top faculty in the country. Well, now we're paying them, 20% less than the median? How long can that be sustainable? And I don't think the answer is to go to the legislature every couple of years. It's to say there's a greater amount of independence and we are going to be great. We're not going to be good. We are going to make the decision to be great. And there will be a lot of changes that occur with that. I think those changes would be for the better.
Best businesses are always accountable to their stakeholders. And I think I would agree with that as well. That would be very helpful. I have a question that came in from Bill Monfrey, who, if I recall correctly, may be on the College of Engineering Board of Visitors. That's not irrelevant to his question. He wonders about the likelihood of the Evers administration including $100 million in the next biennium capital budget for a proposed new building for the College of Engineering. Bill, I will note to Dean Robertson that you were on the call and asked the question. Regent Greeby, I don't know, I'm going to have to go back to you, I think, on this one. What are your thoughts on the capital budget outlook?
Well, you put me on the spot here, Mike, because we're kind of working on that right now. I'm not sure I can give you an answer to that, frankly. We're in the midst of working on the biennial budget. I know there are some things that we really want to accomplish, but I would not want to get out in front of Governor Thompson and our team as we're working collaboratively with the governor's office and the legislature.
Sorry to put you on the spot. I thought I should ask the question since it came in. So I won't ask you this question because it might do the same thing. So this is an anonymous attendee said, in regards to the private business comparison, is it not fair to counter that if the UW system were run privately, it would not have 13 four-year campuses still open when so many have falling enrollment, some dramatically so. So I'll go to a couple private business people, and Kevin, I haven't called on you quite as much. Why don't you start, and we'll kick it over to Mike Shannon, and then maybe get a perspective from Katharine Lyall.
Well, I don't think the UW system is a private business. If it were a private business, certainly you would have to look at what you keep open and what you don't. But there are much broader considerations that go into keeping these open. I think it's important to note that even if you closed an individual campus, it would take years to do that, and the positive economic or budgetary impact wouldn't come for years. So, I think this is a separate issue. It's not the main issue that we're facing here. The main issue is the flagship is really suffering, and how do you first and foremost make sure that we get the flagship to be on a trajectory that's upwards rather than downwards. In business, we say, you're either prospering or you're failing. There is no business that just stays medium forever. You're going in one of two directions. And the flagship, I think, is critical that we get that right.
Regent Greeby, you noted you'd be willing to chime in on this one. And given your role, I want to give you the opportunity to do that, please.
I appreciate that, and I'll be brief because I think there are other people, including Katharine, who probably would like to comment in as well. This is something I have heard repeatedly from people I've spoken to within the UW faculty, administrators, leaders. It's important to remember that the University of Wisconsin is not a business. There are some fundamental business lessons that apply to the University of Wisconsin just the same as they apply to private businesses. We've talked about what might happen to our faculty if we can't pay competitive salaries. That's one. But the mission of the University of Wisconsin is not to create a bottom line return, which is what the mission of most businesses are. The Wisconsin idea is, to a great extent, our mission. And that means we need to do some things that a private business would never do.
Mike Shannon?
Yeah, I would just say, look, I think we have to be practical here. It is not a business, but that doesn't mean we ignore sort of common sense return on investment ideas. In an era of sort of limited dollars, and I think we all have to admit that Wisconsin's going to have, it's struggling right now. Legislators are, really stressing over, a very small allocation of dollars to different needs because we don't have it. So what do you do when you have an era of limits? And I think that means you've got to really feed those winning ideas that you think really have a return on investment to the mission, not necessarily in dollars and cents, although I think they're very correlated. So I would feed the winners and I would adapt those that aren't winning in today's world and look at how we can best utilize those. And I think in today, for example, a holistic approach to education is super important. We have technical schools, we have 2-year colleges, we have 4-year colleges. We have technical schools that can bond, but 4-year colleges that can't. That really doesn't make any sense. So I think in substitution for limited dollars, we need to give flexibility to be competitive, to be market driven, and then we need to have accountability. We need to be able to measure whether these ideas are winning, and we need to reward the outcomes that we want to have for our students, student success, for degree completion, for getting a job. And when you start to look at our research enterprise, that also needs retooling, because we need to not just be the world's largest producer of PhDs that go out of state, feeding on Cory's comment about a brain drain. We need to bring them back with winning ideas and not just send them out. And so that type of research that we're doing in yesterday's world, professors sat around thinking about what they were interested in researching. And as long as they could find some governmental entity to fund them and they could get cited, they get rewarded by how many times their ideas are published in technical journals that may or may not relate to the average citizen in the state of Wisconsin. If we can change that paradigm and create, with the limited dollars we have, the incentives, the dollars to reward those outcomes we want to have, Wisconsin can punch above its weight for a long time and ignore some of the demographic headwinds we have and really feed the winners, which clearly one of those winners is the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I think we can put a lot of topspin on the ball and punch way above our weight if we can all agree on that.
Katharine, Lyall, I want to ask you a question that came in from Senator Roth. What strategies could be employed throughout the UW system to react to Wisconsin's declining population problem, which we've been referencing, but what are the best strategies to your way of thinking for how we might react to that?
Well, I think the university has been moving in that direction and perhaps needs to pick up the pace a little bit, but certainly moving to online instruction, developing certificate programs and other what I would call modularized degrees is a way of reaching people that aren't, because of their life circumstances, in a position to come and be residential students for 4 years on a campus. I think it was Mike mentioned earlier that there are a large number of non-completers in the state, people that have started degrees at a UW campus and have not finished. And we need to devise ways to make it not only feasible technologically for them, but also financially for them to come back and finish those degrees in ways that will be productive for them and for the state. I think we ought to be working with the legislature to see if we could work towards some kind of goal, such as every time you get a cut more than a certain amount, you get a management flexibility to go with it. Because it's been pretty one-sided so far over the last decade. There have been a lot of base budget cuts and no real flexibility or management tools available. So we ought to pair those up in some way so that cuts are paired with management tools that the Board of Regents can use to manage the system much more effectively.
I want to acknowledge a question that came in from Representative Dahlman about where UW-Madison ranks in the Big Ten with the amount of student loan debt. And there's some pretty good data on the facts there. Less than 50% of our undergraduates graduate with any debt at all. And those that have debt, the median level is about $25,000 per student. But we can follow up with Representative Dahlman with up-to-date information in case my memory is failing there. I'm going to close with a question, and I'll start out with Cory Nettles. It comes in from Nancy Shanky, who's been doing advocacy work for the Alumni Association for many years. And, just has this feeling that with the increased polarization we see today, kind of worries that our voices won't be heard, not because of the needs of the state, but more just because of the political landscape that we face. That for whatever reason, some legislators seem to be kind of set against the system. Do you have suggestions on how we can be more effective? And maybe we could go around the horn and people could just offer some closing thoughts on that. What do we need people to do, concerned citizens, to help bring people together, as Mike Shannon put it, behind a common good other than the Green Bay Packers or the Wisconsin Badgers? Cory.
It's an excellent question, and it is exactly why Badgers United and Badger advocates exist. And I think the most important thing we can do is to mobilize the gazillions of alums that we have all across the world, including in every district of every legislator, and have those alums start telling their local legislator about the importance of this institution in their personal and professional development, in their business lives, in the lives of their families. And I think, politics is still very much a retail business. Elected officials listen to those people who elect them, who are often or usually the loudest people, even if they're not the majority people. So I think the thing we've got to do is we've got to mobilize as alums and start doing a better job of telling our story about the importance of this institution to us and all the districts that these legislators represent. Because right now, there is this sense that a legislator can use the university as a whipping boy with impunity. And that plays well in a lot of local districts all across our state. And I understand from a political perspective, the efficiency of that, or how attractive that might be. But it's incumbent upon us who love this institution and who understand its value to get active and to get engaged in talking to our legislators about the importance of this institution to our state. And if they hear from more and more and more of us who are making more and more and more demands on them, I believe that they'll be responsive, even if they don't believe it, just as a matter of political expedience. So I would say mobilize your alum friends and get them to light up the phones and the mail waves, the airwaves with their advocacy on behalf of the UW.
Kevin, as a business leader in the state, how well unified is the business community around the importance of the university system, in your opinion?
We're based in Madison, here in the life sciences community and in the healthcare community, the likes of Epic, Promega, Illumina, the list goes on. It's critically important. It's our lifeblood. It's our talent. It's our people. And I think that we really make an impact on the state. If you take a look at Exact Sciences median annual income, it's $100,000 a year. And that's across 5,500 employees. We have 600 job posting, 500 different position types. You can't do that. You can't hire those people unless you go to a major metropolitan area or you set up shop next to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And so it's critically important to us.
Katharine, Lyall, any thoughts on how alumni can better mobilize or create the pressure that we need to get the legislature behind us?
Sorry, I think you've asked the right question, because legislators expect to hear people like Mike Grebe and Katharine Lyall and Chancellor Rebecca Blank advocate for the university. That doesn't mean we shouldn't keep doing it, but they need to hear from other constituencies as well. So I was really pleased to hear Kevin's comments about support from the business community. And our alumni, of course, are very broadly representative of all kinds of businesses, industries, sectors, profit, nonprofit. And the more legislators realize that reach of our alumni and our graduates, I think the more effective it will be just relying on people working for or associated with the university to make the case won't be successful, because that's what's expected. Yes, we need to get out there and make some noise. And I would hope in the process, we would also ask legislators not only to make decisions for the university related to the next biennial budget, but to ask long-term what kind of university system they want this state to have. Because even though they make short-term decisions now, they have really important long-term consequences.
I want to be mindful of the time. I think I'm getting the sign that we're past due. I was supposed to hand this back to Peter Kais, who I want to thank Peter and Linda for organizing this forum today. And it's been a pleasure to talk with all of you on the panel. Really appreciate all your insights, and look forward to working with you in the coming months to continue to push the visibility of this study, its implications, and what we can do to further the interests of higher education in Wisconsin. So thank you very much, Peter. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you all for carving out time from your busy days. As I think we've all seen, there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. There's a lot more discussion that has to be done and had. And I think hopefully this will kick off a greater understanding of the issues, and hopefully we can start finding some of those long-term solutions. So I appreciate the time. Anybody that's interested in learning more about what Badgers United is doing, or some of our sister organizations, please reach out to me or Linda. And I hope everyone has a great week.